Have you ever noticed how a day with absolutely zero plans, like a day where you have total unstructured freedom to do whatever you want, how it so often ends in just a puddle of procrastination?
Oh, yeah. And usually some mild self-loathing by the time evening hits.
Exactly. You reach 5 p.m. and think, I mean, what did I even do today?
Right. It's a remarkably universal experience. We crave these days without structure because we think the absence of rules equals liberation.
It doesn't, right?
Not at all. Biologically and psychologically, a complete lack of structure usually just throws us into a massive state of decision fatigue. When you have to decide what to do with every single free hour, you end up doing nothing.
You just freeze. And that exact paradox is really the foundation of the material we are diving into today.
It is.
We've been tearing through this stack of articles, summaries, and excerpts centered around a book called Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL commander, and his core argument, well, it completely flips the script on how we view self-control.
Yeah, he argues that the freedom we think we want, the freedom to sleep in, to eat garbage, to just avoid hard things is actually a cage. It enslaves you to your impulses.
It's a really profound shift in perspective.
Hmm.
True freedom, whether you were talking about like financial independence, peak physical health, or even just mental peace, it's the direct result of strict self-imposed rules.
Exactly. The undisciplined person is constantly negotiating with themselves. They are subjected to the daily whims of their own motivation, which, as we know, is notoriously unreliable.
Right, because motivation fades.
Totally. But discipline handles the baseline maintenance of life so efficiently that it just eliminates that internal negotiation entirely.
I love looking at discipline not as a prison cell, but almost like scaffolding. It's this rigid structure you put up so you can build the exact life you actually want inside of it.
The scaffolding metaphor works perfectly because it highlights stability.
Right, like if you want the freedom to play with your kids in the evening without a pit in your stomach about unfinished work, you need the rigid scaffolding of time management during the day.
Without it, you are just reactive. And to understand how to build that stability, Willink suggests starting at the absolute foundation of your day. You have to establish control before the day even has a chance to begin.
Which leads us to his infamous four-mortar AM rule.
Yes, waking up before dawn is presented as an absolute non-negotiable daily requirement. Weekends, holidays, traveling, it doesn't matter.
Okay, I have to push back on this immediately, just on behalf of everyone listening who is definitively not a morning person.
Fair enough.
I mean, I've seen the photos he posts of his watch at 4:30 a.m. But is waking up before the birds really about getting an extra hour of tangible work done? Or is this like just an extreme psychological trick?
It's a great question.
Because a graphic designer or a software engineer doesn't necessarily need to be awake at 4 a.m. to be brilliant at their job, right?
Right, the time on the clock is merely the mechanism.
Yeah.
The actual goal is psychological leverage. Willink views waking up early as starting the day before the enemy wakes up.
The enemy being who?
Well, that enemy might be a competitor in your industry, sure. But far more often, the enemy is your own innate desire for comfort. Think about the sheer biological friction of a 4:30 a.m. alarm.
Oh, it's brutal. Your body is begging for sleep.
Exactly. Your brain is suddenly offering you a dozen perfectly logical excuses to stay in bed.
Your brain becomes an expert negotiator at that hour. It's like you work late, or you need recovery, or just 10 more minutes.
And the moment you hit snooze, you have lost the very first negotiation of the day. You have surrendered to weakness.
Wow. So you're starting the day with a defeat.
Right. But when you force yourself out of bed, when you absolutely don't have to, you establish a definitive victory. From a neurological standpoint, conquering that friction releases a hit of dopamine tied to self-efficacy.
You are proving to yourself, before the sun is even up, that your will is stronger than your impulses.
Yes, that sets a proactive baseline that resonates through every single decision you make for the next 18 hours. It's an elite performance mindset.
So you're establishing total dominance over your own brain right out of the gate. And the manual is clear that you don't just wake up and, sit on the couch. The immediate next step is physical training.
Right, because discipline has to start in the physical body. It's biological conditioning. If you cannot control what you force your physical body to do or what you allow yourself to consume, you are simply not equipped to control the abstract complexities of a business.
Or a marriage, or a crisis.
Exactly. Willink stresses that sugar is the enemy, not just for diet culture reasons, but because of impulse control.
Right, because if you can't resist the cheap, sugary dopamine hit of, say, a donut sitting in the break room, How in the world are you going to resist the urge to panic when your startup loses its biggest client?
That is the exact psychology behind it. It's the same neural pathway. Giving in to what feels easy in the moment is a habit.
So when you force yourself to work out instead, you're obviously building physical muscle. But more importantly, you're proving that discomfort isn't a wall. It's just a hurdle.
And the cascading effect of that realization is massive. Physical discipline creates the neurological bridge to mental discipline. When you train to exhaustion, you learn how your mind operates under stress.
You realize you're capable of enduring significantly more than your initial panic response suggests.
Precisely. If your body is weak and you constantly cave to physical comfort, your mind will be the very first thing to shatter under the pressure of a real-world crisis.
But conquering the morning in your own quiet garage gym is, it's only half the battle, isn't it?
It is.
Because that physical armor is great when you're alone. But what happens when you leave the house and the world inevitably punches you in the face? Things break. Coworkers let you down.
The economy shifts.
Right. How do we translate that physical control into surviving the absolute chaos of real life?
That requires transitioning from physical toughness to mental armor. And Willink introduces a philosophy here that is incredibly powerful, though it often catches people completely off guard. It's his concept of good.
Oh, yeah. I was reading the background on this, and there was a story in the sources about Jocko leading his SEAL task unit through an absolute nightmare scenario in combat.
Right, in Ramadi.
Yeah, they were out of resources, exhausted, the weather was horrific. His guys would bring him these catastrophic, seemingly insurmountable problems, but his reaction completely threw me off. He didn't yell, he didn't panic.
His default response to every single crisis was simply the word, good.
Which, I'm sorry, sounds completely absurd on the surface. If someone tells you the server crashed and deleted a month of work, and you say, good, you sound like a lunatic.
You do.
Or worse, it sounds like toxic positivity, like you are just ignoring reality.
It is the exact opposite of toxic positivity, actually. Toxic positivity is a form of denial. It's pretending the bad thing is happening.
Wow.
Or saying, everything happens for a reason to avoid dealing with the pain.
Right. So what is the good mindset then?
Willink's concept of good is a rapid, tactical, cognitive reframing. By saying good, you are acknowledging the brutal reality of the obstacle, but you are instantly forcing your brain to pivot away from complaint and towards strategic advantage.
So it's an override switch. Got injured? Good. Now I have time to finally read those industry books and improve my mental game.
Exactly. Got fired. Good. It's the ultimate push I needed to start my own business.
Project failed. Good. We just gained invaluable data on exactly what not to do next time. It just instantly kills victim mentality.
And it prevents the emotional downward spiral. To execute that good mindset effectively, Willink pairs it with the tactic of emotional detachment.
Detachment. Let's unpack that.
So he recognizes that human beings, even elite military operators, use fundamentally faulty judgment when they allow ego and emotion to drive their decisions. Detachment is the practice of mentally stepping back from a volatile situation to view it as a neutral, objective bystander.
I love the analogy the sources use for this because it's so incredibly relatable. We all give phenomenal, crystal clear advice to our friends when they're going through a crisis. Right?
Oh, for sure. We can see exactly what they need to do.
But when we face the exact same problem in our own lives, we completely fall apart. We fail to follow our own advice because we're tangled up in fear, pride, and bias.
Yes. Detachment is pretending you are looking at your own life from the outside, giving unbiased advice to a friend. It is a deliberate mental step backward, separating the event from your visceral reaction to the event.
Because uncontrolled emotional reactions are viewed as a glaring lack of discipline.
Exactly.
I have to challenge this, though. I understand the value of stepping back, but isn't there a danger of taking this too far? Like if you constantly detach from your emotions, don't you risk becoming apathetic?
Becoming robotic.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a machine that just stops caring about anything.
That is actually the most common pitfall people face when trying to adopt this mindset. The goal is not to permanently amputate your humanity or switch off your feelings. The mechanism Willink teaches is temporary, tactical detachment.
Temporary.
Think of it as a strategic pause. You detach in the moment of crisis so that you can analyze the failure objectively and extract the necessary data without being blinded by panic.
Oh, I see. It's like hitting the mute button on your own internal panic alarm. The alarm is still physically flashing, the emergency is real, but you've muted the deafening noise just long enough so you can actually read the map and find the exit.
That is a perfect way to visualize the neuroscience behind it. While that internal alarm is muted, your prefrontal cortex, the logical, problem-solving part of your brain, finally has the silence it needs to override the amygdala.
And the amygdala is the part screaming at you to fight or flee.
Right. You process the heavy emotions later, on your own terms, in a safe environment. But in the heat of the moment, unchecked emotion is a critical liability.
And when you use that prefrontal cortex to view reality objectively, without all the emotional static, it inevitably leads to a rather harsh truth, doesn't it?
It does.
When you detach and look at the map with total clarity, you realize there's really only one person sitting in the driver's seat.
Which brings us to the heaviest concept in this deep dive: extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership. This originated directly on the battlefield. The overarching observation was that the absolute best leaders and the most resilient teams were the ones who took ownership of everything in their operational world.
Everything, not just their own tasks.
Exactly. They didn't just take responsibility for their specific assigned duties. They took ownership of every single challenge, miscommunication, and failure that impacted the mission.
No excuses. No finger pointing. The manual points out that when things go sideways, weaker people immediately look for an external scapegoat.
Always. They blame their boss, they blame the supply chain, they blame the algorithm, they blame their childhood. They complain the system is rigged. But a truly disciplined leader casts zero blame outward. They take 100% responsibility for the problem, no matter what it is, and then they execute a solution.
And this military principle translates seamlessly to civilian life. It changes the dynamic of business, relationships, and personal health.
How so?
Well, if you are a manager and your team misses a deadline, blaming your employees makes them defensive and kills trust. But if you step up and say, I didn't communicate the parameters clearly enough, this failure is on me, here is how we fix it, the entire atmosphere shifts.
You earn immediate respect.
Right. And ironically, modeling that extreme accountability empowers your team to start taking ownership of their own missteps.
Okay, I hear that, and in a boardroom setting, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But let me throw a realistic, everyday scenario at you, because this is where a lot of people, maybe even you listening right now, might feel this philosophy breaks down.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you're trying to get to a crucial job interview, and your flight gets canceled due to a massive, unforeseen thunderstorm. Or you're parked completely legally at the grocery store, and someone backs their truck into your car and drives off.
Right.
How in the world is taking 100% ownership of the weather, or a literal hit-and-run, fair? Isn't it just exhausting to carry the weight of things you couldn't possibly control?
It is incredibly exhausting at first. It feels like an unfair burden. But let's look at the psychology of the alternative. If you view extreme ownership as taking cosmic fault for the thunderstorm, it makes no sense.
Right, you aren't controlling the sky.
Exactly. Willink's principle isn't about blaming yourself for the weather. It is about taking absolute ownership of the response.
You don't own the lightning strike, but you own what happens the second after it hits.
Yes. This deals heavily with what psychologists call your locus of control. If you have an external locus of control, you stand at the airport screaming at the gate agent because the weather ruined your life. You are entirely powerless.
You're just a victim of circumstance.
And being a victim spikes your cortisol, drains your energy, and leads to learned helplessness.
Because you're just waiting for someone else to fix it.
Right. But an internal locus of control extreme ownership shifts the dynamic entirely. You say, okay, the flight is canceled. That is reality. It is now my absolute responsibility to find a solution.
So you start asking, can I rent a car and drive? Can I pivot this to a virtual interview and crush it on video?
Exactly. Letting go of the victim mindset is difficult, but it frees up all the cognitive energy you were wasting on being angry. The exhaustion of agency is infinitely more productive than the exhaustion of victimhood.
That reframing is incredibly empowering because the moment you blame someone else, even if they truly are at fault, you are literally handing them the power over your emotional state and your future.
You are giving away your freedom.
Right. Extreme ownership is taking that power back. It proves how strict discipline in your mindset directly creates the freedom to move forward.
Which naturally brings us to the critical hurdle.
The execution.
Yes. Taking ownership is a powerful mental shift in theory. But how do we bridge the massive gap between knowing we are responsible for our lives and actually doing the hard, grinding work required to change them? Insight without action is useless.
We have to move from mindset to execution. That is the perfect transition to the concept of default to action and destroying procrastination. So many of us suffer from analysis paralysis.
Everywhere.
Like if someone wants to start a business, they'll read 10 books, listen to 50 business deep dives, design a logo, make complex spreadsheets.
Wait for the perfect economic conditions.
Yeah. And they never actually make a single sale.
Willing's cure for this is brutally simple and almost completely devoid of nuance. When confronted with tactical questions about how to improve, he strips away all the overthinking and planning.
Give me an example.
Someone asks, how do I become a better leader? The answer is, lead. How do I get stronger? Squat. How do I write a book? Write.
It's a relentless get-after-it mentality. The physical act of doing is always superior to the theoretical act of thinking. But this exposes a huge tension point that ruins so many people's goals, which is the battle between motivation and discipline.
A critical distinction.
We are conditioned by society to wait until we feel like doing something. We wait for inspiration to strike or for that burst of adrenaline after watching a motivational video.
And relying on that feeling is a fatal flaw for any long-term endeavor. Motivation is an emotion, and like all emotions, it is fickle. It comes and goes based on your blood sugar, how much you slept, or if someone cut you off in traffic.
It's totally unpredictable.
But discipline is not an emotion. It is a reliable system of action. You absolutely cannot wait for motivation because on the days it is dark, freezing rain, and you are exhausted, motivation will abandon you. Discipline is the only mechanism that gets you out of bed on those days.
It always makes me think of standing on the edge of a freezing cold swimming pool. You can stand there analyzing the water temperature forever. You can psych yourself up. You can stretch. You can wait until you feel truly ready.
But standing on the edge drains your energy, and the water isn't getting any warmer.
Right. The only way to actually swim is to embrace the friction and jump. The shock is going to happen regardless. But let me play devil's advocate here. What if the listener is facing a massive, highly complex project, something where they genuinely do not know what the very first step should be? Jumping in blindly feels reckless.
That is a fair concern, but Willink has a very pusing response to that exact excuse. He says, you already know what the right thing to do is, you just got to do it.
Oh, man. That stings because if we are honest with ourselves, it's almost always true.
It is. Procrastination rarely comes from total ignorance. It lives in the dead space between thought and action. Even with a massive, complex project, you usually know a first step. You don't need to know step 50.
Maybe step 1 is just drafting a terrible, messy outline.
Or making one phone call to an expert who knows more than you. The strategy is to default to action, no matter how small or imperfect.
Because taking that small action generates momentum, and momentum burns away the fog of overthinking. You don't think your way into a new way of acting, you act your way into a new way of thinking.
Exactly. Action creates clarity. And to bring all of these concepts together, Willink's material essentially outlines a developmental timeline, like a psychological boot camp, so you can start applying this extreme discipline immediately.
Yes, let's synthesize that 30-day timeline for the listener so they have a concrete framework. So day 1 is all about the morning. You set the alarm for 4:30 a.m. or whatever your equivalent is to waking up significantly before you absolutely have to.
Right, and when it goes off, you don't negotiate. You get up. You secure that first psychological victory.
Then, by week 2, you have expanded that control to the physical foundation. You establish a consistent, grueling physical training routine, and you ruthlessly eliminate processed sugars and cheap dopamine from your diet.
You prove to your brain that you can endure friction.
Moving into month 1, this is where the mental armor gets locked into place. The word good becomes your automatic default response to setbacks, flat tires, or canceled flights.
You stop complaining and pivot immediately to tactical problem solving. You practice temporary detachment to keep your amygdala in check.
Finally, month 3 is about total mastery and extreme ownership. By this point, the internal negotiations, the maybe I'll do it tomorrow, the I'm too tired, they are eliminated.
You no longer blame external circumstances for your position in life. You have built the scaffolding.
It's an intense, uncompromising way to live. But it brings us to a heavy, resonating thought from the very beginning of the book that we want to leave you with today. Willink promises that there are no hacks. There is no secret shortcut to success.
No, he says, if you want to take the easy road, I promise you, it's longer and more painful than the hard road.
It is a profound realization about the nature of time. The comfort we desperately cling to today almost always compounds into the suffering of our future.
The easy road is always an illusion. Comfort today is suffering tomorrow.
So I want you to think about a hard choice or a difficult task that you are actively avoiding right now. You know exactly what it is. What invisible, painful tax are you going to pay on that temporary comfort a year from now if you don't choose the hard path of discipline today?
The cost is always higher than you think.
So build the scaffolding, set the alarm, and
But
get after it.